Did you ever make a bad decision? You know, like you go into the restaurant and order the only thing on the menu where the animal died in vain. Hey, Mr. Brother Steve, it's good to see you. And, or you get in the line. Look, I'm going to tell you ladies, I'm going to give you ladies a little inside scoop. I probably shouldn't tell you this. All the men will hate me for this. But if you want to buckle the knees of the strongest man on the planet, here's how you do it. It happens to me every time. You get in a line at Walmart, you know, you're checking out. Now you got 85 people behind you. You're stuck. And you see this sweet old lady opens up her change purse and starts paying. Oh, no, wait. Oh, that's a wheat penny. No, I save these for my grandchildren. And when I don't want to hurt her. I want to pay her bill. I said, here, take 20s and just keep the change. Get this woman out of my way. I mean, you thought it was a good aisle, you know, but when you got there, it wasn't. Or you ever get on a tollway and you get trapped in a line and you get the short line, but then the guy paying in front of you is paying with coins and it falls on the concrete? What I'm saying is sometimes you think you made a good decision and you didn't. What if I told you there's a way you could always make a good decision? Sound good? This is true. Go to church. Really, always a good decision. Go to church. It always is. So I'm just glad you're here. It's always. I appreciate the Lord. I appreciate being able to go to church. I will mention the book table because you guys haven't bought enough. I didn't give you our guarantee. I have to say I'm sorry. I should have said this earlier. But if you if you get anything whatsoever off of my book table, you are not 100% satisfied. Tough. This ain't Walmart, okay? In fact, if you get something from my book table and you're not satisfied, take it back to Walmart. They will take anything, okay? When we get a little low on cash, I take some of my books back to Walmart. They don't even know. They don't even know. You know, I said that as a joke. You do know that was a joke. And this guy came up to me after church. He goes, you know where I work? I said, where? He said, Walmart. I said, really? He goes, you know what I do? I said, his boss is probably wondering that. Anyway, I said, no, what do you do? He goes, I'm in the returns. People bring stuff back. I get it. And he goes, what you said is so true. He said, the other day I was looking at like a mixer or a coffee maker that somebody brought back, and they brought it back in the box, and the price tag said Kmart. They bought it at Kmart, brought it back to Walmart. So try that with the books. Maybe it'll work. But anyway, the stuff is back there. I think your church is familiar with those. Those are the lessons. This is the Series 11, aimed at the 11th grade. The red border is aimed at grade 12. Guys, I travel to different churches all the time. And I'll tell you what got to me. A number of years ago, I would hear about broken-hearted parents. It'd either be a parent or a pastor. And they'd say, we sent our son or daughter or one of our church young people to a King James Bible-believing Bible college. And when they got there, the first thing they heard was King James homosexual, Easter's mistranslation, the italics don't belong in the Bible. Honest, I've had them say they came back here and called us heretics. Their own family called us heretics and broke fellowship with us, left the church. And I say this, guys, why should we have to keep re-evangelizing our own kids? And so we put these together. They're very, if you're familiar with ACE, they're very similar to that, 12 lessons per year. I was just over in Australia. We got a Pacific representative over there, and they put them together, so for that side of the world. But this is a vaccine. These are designed to inoculate your children before they go to a King James school. And I know what you parents are saying. Well, I'll just call the president of the college and I'll ask him. And you think he's going to say, send your kid here and we'll destroy his faith in the book? You know what he's going to say? He's going to say whatever you want to hear. Then he's going to hang up the phone and say, we'll straighten that kid out when he gets here. And by straighten out, he means get him off the book. And we've had just some really good success. I've been getting a lot of testimonies. One particular testimony, I got this young man. I literally preached to him all of his life. I was there when he was born. Watched him grow over the years. And he got an appointment a number of years ago to the Air Force Academy. He needed to take these lessons, you know, in homeschooling. And he called his mom after about 2 weeks in the Air Force Academy. He said, Mom, he said, we just spent about a week out. You know, I'm in a 14-man tent. He's the sole saved guy in 14 guys. And he said, we got talking about the Bible. Now, let me tell you people this is lost man's logic. He said, 14 lost guys. You know what they said? If God really wrote the Bible, there'd only be one and not so many. See, A lost man's got good sense. You've got to be saved to be stupid, okay? I don't say you have to be stupid to be saved, but you have to be saved to be stupid. And he told his mom, he said, Mom, for the next 2 hours and 45 minutes, I gave them what I learned in those lessons. So those are back there. This one, I didn't write this. We published this. It's called The Bread of Life. I get a lot of people, they say, I just want kind of a simple book to give me an overview, like an overall Bible knowledge book. I will read you the table of contents and probably give you a bachelor's degree. Let me see here if I can find it. They're usually in front. All right, what's covered in this book, there's a chapter on repentance, the Trinity of God and man, necessity for salvation, understanding salvation, baptism of the Holy Spirit, walking in the Spirit, a study on faith, understanding prayer, forgiveness, the armor of God, Christian suffering, dispensations, the deity of Jesus Christ, which Bible is God's book, is the Bible true, a study on water baptism, eternal security, all about hell, facts about tongues, separation, soul winning, what about tithing, what about tithing, what about tithing? Oh, I'm sorry, that's not in there 3 times. I just thought some of you probably need to hear it 3 times. Healing, the rapture, Christian judgment, the Antichrist, the millennium, white throne judgment, chart on prophecy, the world, a section on the world, one on the flesh, one on the devil, addictions, capital punishment, characteristics of God, sound doctrine, gossip and slander. Now, that's not a how-to chapter. Not that I ever saw Baptists needed lessons. Sexual sins, 2 creations, factor of fiction, defeating your Goliath, imaginations and fantasies. And I've gotten, and by the way, just for your information, I don't have it with me. This is the only book that we publish that we also have it in Spanish. So if you have somebody Spanish speaking, that is a real good book when a Spanish speaker gets saved and needs to get some initial Bible. If they're not going to go off to Bible college, get some initial Bible information and education. That is a good book for them. Now, I'm working on these. I had a vision, and it was what it was. You guys, if you ever put a bunch of books on a bookshelf without bookends, they fall over, right? So I said, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to do the bookend King James books. And that would be the simplest and the most difficult. And the simplest is done. The most difficult I've been working on for literally a decade. I need to get it done. Traveled a couple times to the British Library in England. And that is a catalog of all the Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. But this is the simplest one, and this is called The Time When There Was No Bible. I call this Baby's First King James Book. They say, well, why do we have to teach our kids, that young about the King James Bible? Let me tell you why. Because if you have been in this country very long, there was a day when a kid graduated from public school and went to college, secular college, and in that 3-month period, somebody would come up to him and say, hey, when you get to college, don't get on drugs. Now you got to tell a kid going from the 6th grade to the 7th grade that. Isn't that true? Well, it used to be in Christian schools and home schools, kid graduates from one of those and he's going to go to Bible college. And somebody would say, now look, when you get to Bible college, don't let them destroy your faith in your Bible. Well, now they're losing it with their homeschooling. So I say, why don't we give it to them on their mother's knee? You ladies, before there was public school, private school, charter school, Christian school, whatever, let me tell you where the education of the young people of this nation started, on their mother's lap. So why don't we give it to them there? This is a simple 4-color kids book. I get this. I get broken-hearted grandparents, and they say, we brought our kids up in this church, taught them the Bible, the King James Bible, and then they went off to Bible college, or they go to another church. Now they're using an ESV, and our grandkids are growing up with the wrong Bible. And here's what I recommend to the grandparents. Get the book, invite the grandkids over, and corrupt them. It's kind of like getting even with your kids, okay? But this is just a 4-color book, and it is. I will say this, probably, whoever teaches their child or grandchild or reads this to them, you will probably learn something about the history of your Bible. So that is there. Now, when I did this, I did the drawings for it, and I sent them to my graphics lady, and she sent me back the drafts in pen and ink. And so when she sent it, I thought, well, man, if you want the simplest book on the King James, I guess a coloring book is really. So now we have a kid's coloring book. This is this book, except you have to color it yourself. So some of you guys might want to buy this one. Now, I got to tell you this. Mary told you last night about that former student I had. I sent him a coloring book and said, stay within the lines, don't need the crayons. I don't have to go buy one now. And there's a guy out in Phoenix, Arizona. It seems like Phoenix, Arizona, the sun must be very, very hot there because it burns out the brains of a lot of people in Phoenix. And a guy named James White. And if you really think about this, let me help you people. And I'm going to say this, and you think I'm being catchy when I say this. I am being accurate when I say this. No matter what you've heard, no matter what you believe, there is no King James Bible issue. There is no King James controversy. Oh, yeah, preacher. No, there is not. There is a quote-unquote perfect Bible controversy. I say that for this reason. If all of we who believe that this book is perfect, the King James Bible, if we decided in this building tonight, and if somehow all around the world this could take place, if all of us King James Bible believers said, you know what, those guys are right. There's mistakes in the King James Bible. It is not the perfect Word of God. First off, all of those anti-King James guys would say, well, it's about time they got some good sense, right? Then we finish our statement by saying, yep, the King James Bible is not the perfect Word of God. The English Standard Version is the perfect Word of God. Everybody that's anti-King James today would be anti-ESV tomorrow. I'll guarantee it. You know why? Because it's not a King James controversy. It is a perfect Bible controversy. And if you want to melt down what you and I believe to the smallest statement, it is basically this. We believe God had enough power to inspire the book perfect in the originals and preserve it perfect to this day. Isn't that really what you believe? You can say it, as elongated with as many vowels in the words you want. That really says it. God had enough power to inspire it perfect in the original and enough power to preserve it to this day. And when we say that, James White and company come running out of the wing on the other side going, and here's basically what they believe. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. That's really what they believe. The thought that God actually they all wax eloquent about it being perfect in the original because they know nobody's ever going to dig up the original and contest their faith. But you put a perfect book on this planet and they have a problem. So, I want James White to get straightened out on this issue. I care deeply. And I want something he could understand and read. And you say, you're not going to send him a coloring book. No, I am not. I really am not. I promise you I'm not, because I already did. And I did. I wrote him the same thing I said to my student. I said, James, remember the two most important things. Stay within the lines. Don't eat the crayons. So, you know what he said? I saw it. I saw it myself. He is on a platform with another speaker. Do you know who the other speaker is? The other speaker is an unsaved Muslim cleric connected with the jihad. And James White said, I have a kindred spirit with this man. Now you explain to me, because I got news for you guys. A guy can think the King James got holes in it like the Swiss cheese and use a modern translation, but if he's saved, we have a kindred spirit with them, do we not? All right. If James White walked into a room and one of you were in that room and a Muslim who hates Jews and Christians was in that room, James White would say, I have a kindred spirit with the Muslim. There is a problem with that, all right? This one, I didn't write this. We published it. It's called The Certainty of the Words. That is over 800 pages on the infallibility of the English text of your King James Bible. I will make a guarantee for that book right there. That book will stop a Bible corrector in their tracks. If you can get him right about the bridge of the nose. That might even slow my mother-in-law down. Anyway, that is back there. This one, I told you, I think last night about the book called Living with Pain, because that's what I do. We have two books I'm very excited about of all the books that we publish for other people. We have two of them I'm excited about. This is one of them because two of our authors, since we published their book, have gone home to be with the Lord. What scares you if you're thinking about getting a book published with us, isn't it? Anyway, this brother's a guy named Bob Murphy. Bob was in Vietnam when he was a lost man. got involved with intravenous drugs, got out of Vietnam, lived through that, but his liver didn't. He got cirrhosis, or got hepatitis, I think it was C, and they did a liver transplant, and I think Bob was with us about maybe 60 days after we published this book. It's called The Fight for Light, The Spiritual Battle with Chronic Illness. I don't have chronic illness, but some people do. There's probably somebody in here diabetic, you got lupus. There's just no telling. You know, some of you are fighting something. And again, you may know a lost friend that has a chronic illness, and that book may be a help to him. Also, like the Living with Pain book, there's a good chapter on salvation. That one, this I wrote years ago. It's called We Are Americans. And I will contend there's more American history in, I think it's, I don't know if there's page numbers on this or not. Nope. It's just a few pages, but there's more American history in that than you'll get in 12 years of public education. I was raised in public education, which means I was lied to 5 days a week. And one of the lies I was told was that America was not founded by Christians, it was founded by deists. Now, whenever somebody says that, say this, name 5. Don't say name 2, because they'll say Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. And I go, yeah, and who else? Because anybody here, are you aware there was more than 2 founding fathers? And those 2 men were deists, except Thomas Jefferson, though he was a deist, he didn't think he was. He thought he was a Christian and wanted to be known as a Christian. Ben Franklin, you guys, you may even know a preacher who's been asked to open Congress in prayer. You hear about preachers open Congress in prayer. Do you know why we open Congress in prayer? Because the deist, Ben Franklin, told the the first Congress, before this nation was even founded, he said that if a sparrow can't fall from its nest without God being aware of it, how can an empire rise without God's help? And this deist said we need to get together and pray, because they were like, the first Congress, they were acting like a Baptist business meeting. They were at each other's throats. They're about to start 13 new countries. And they opened Congress in prayer and have been doing it ever since because of that deist. But guys, these were saved men. Most of them were saved men. Example, John Jay. John Jay was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He said this, unto him who is the author and giver of all good, I render sincere and humble thanks for his manifold unmerited blessings, and especially for our redemption and salvation by his beloved Son. Blessed be his holy name. If you ever meet somebody who says they're a deist, ask him if they'll say amen to that statement. They will not. John Quincy Adams, he was our 6th president, he said, my hopes of a future life are all founded upon the gospel of Christ. Samuel Adams, signer of the Declaration of Independence, said, principally and first of all, I recommend my soul to that almighty being who gave it, and my body I commit to the dust, relying upon the merits of Jesus Christ for a pardon of all my sins. If that's a deist, we need more of them. Okay? Charles Carroll, another signer of the Declaration, he said, on the mercy of my Redeemer I rely for salvation, and on his merits, not on any works which I have done. And I love this one. Benjamin Rush, he also signed the Declaration of Independence. He said, my only hope of salvation is in the infinite, transcendent love of God manifested to the world by the death of his Son upon the cross. Nothing but his blood will wash away my sins. I rely exclusively upon it. Come, Lord Jesus, come quickly. Now, I can't stop people from lying to you, but it's your fault if you believe them. And I'll guarantee if you show somebody that, they'll go, well, okay, so maybe they're Christians, but they didn't push their faith on anybody. Well, first off, ask them, were you there? You seem to be such an expert on this. You don't look that old. Here's what some of them said. George Washington, you probably heard of him. He said, it is impossible to rightly govern the world without God and the Bible. The deist, Thomas Jefferson, said the Bible is the source of liberty. He said the Bible makes the best people in the world. John Quincy Adams, so great is my veneration for the Bible that the earlier my children begin to read it, the more confident will be my hope that they will prove useful citizens to this country and respectable members of society. Maybe that's why we have a problem with our citizenry today. Because they're not being... How many of you How many of you came up through public school like I did, and you remember opening your school days in public school with prayer and Bible reading? Anybody remember that? Yeah. I can still remember them holding the stone tablets, reading it. Okay. What was the greatest thing Patrick Henry ever said? No. When I say the greatest thing Patrick Henry ever said, what was it? Oh, give me liberty or give me death. You know why you think that's the greatest thing he ever said? That's the only thing you know. The greatest thing Patrick Henry, that's the second greatest thing that he ever said. The greatest thing he ever said was, I'll take the pan pizza pepperoni lovers. No, I'm sorry, that's the third greatest thing he said. The greatest thing he ever said, and I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to not finish this statement, and I'm going to let you finish it the way TV and public education would think you should. He said this, it cannot be emphasized too strongly or too often that this great nation was founded. How? I was founded to be a multicultural society where people could, ponder which bathroom they want to use. Here's what he said, was founded not by religionists but by Christians, not on religions but on the gospel of Jesus Christ. Here's another one. John Quincy again. The highest glory of the American Revolution was this. Well, what was it? Free enterprise, multicultural society. We're going to save the earth. Here's what your sixth president said. The highest glory of the American Revolution was this, that it connected in one indissoluble bond the principles of civil government with the principles of Christianity. So don't come around saying, separation church and state. Yeah, they didn't want a state church. We have one now. It's called humanism. And then there's a section in here that has an excerpt from all of the, every one of the 50 states, state constitutions. And amazingly, I looked at them, and out of 50 states, God is only mentioned in 50 of their constitutions. A weird-looking place, or weird state named New York. We, the people of the state of New York, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom in order to secure its blessings, so on and so forth. This state's constitution starts out thanking Almighty God. And every state's constitution mentions God. And then there's a couple of things that, there's a couple of things you need to not do, okay? Like this. I refuse to be intimidated into not living for the Lord. I refuse to give myself to the flesh. I refuse to let anyone change my country into something it was never intended to be. I refuse to allow myself to be bullied into silence by those who wish to turn my country away from God. I refuse to let my failures stop me. I refuse to back down from a confrontation in defense of my country and its God. I refuse to let my country be defined by those who don't love it. Finishes with this. I am an American. I forsake any allegiance to the ethnic background of the country my ancestors came from. I am an American. I will not join in criticisms of my country, its history, its language, or its people. I am an American. I will respect and defend the flag of my country. I am an American. I will gladly pledge my allegiance to this one nation under God. I am an American. I will give my employer an honest day's work. I am an American. I will endeavor to keep myself pure from the corruptions that weaken my power to do good. I am an American. I will openly and without apology worship the God of the Bible, the God of America, and will concede no ground to any false god. So those are back there. Now here's what these are. These are two for a dollar. 2 for $1. No, I did not say 50 cents a piece. I said 2 for $1. So what's the difference? I'm not going to stand around with a pocket full of quarters to make change. So you get 2 for $1. Only want 1. Okay, for you, 1 for $1. Just to show you that we're willing to, do what we can to make you happy. Anyway, those those are back there. And guys, it is just good to be saved. I want you to know it's been good to be here. I enjoyed the last time was here when your pastor's dad was the pastor. I've enjoyed being with your pastor. It's good to see Brother Burke here. I preached for him a number of years ago. Brother, I cannot tell you. My wife and I love you. I can't tell you how many times over the years I've said, boy, wouldn't it be good to see Wouldn't it be good to see all of our preacher friends in New York? Anyway, it is. It's good to see you. It's good to see Brother Bear. I just didn't realize how many of these guys I owed money to. I want you to open your Bible to 2 Timothy chapter 2. 2 Timothy chapter 2. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, because I guess being Americans, I don't know if you've ever thought. But since you got saved, you have been spiritually prepared for death, correct? I think you guys are aware. Phil Huber was a very good friend of mine. I loved him. And yes, I guess this past Saturday, I was in the air. I couldn't go to his funeral. I'm literally flying here for this meeting. But him and his wife were out jogging, and boom, he was dead in 6 minutes. Years ago, when I was in Bible college, there was the piano player in the church, and my wife, and the wife of another student. The three of them sang in a trio. And a number of years ago, the lady who'd been the piano player, she's walking down the hall in her house with her husband, and he said she just went and dropped dead. Now, really, we don't have to worry about that. You ever talk to somebody about getting saved and they'll go, well, I think I'll wait until, my deathbed. People don't get that chance. If you were to fall over dead right now, if you're saved, that's okay, because since you got saved, you have been spiritually prepared for death, correct? But that doesn't mean that you are psychologically prepared for it. And by that I mean this. We all, we boast about, I'm not worried about dying. Well, I know you're not worried about dying, but if you thought you were, you might worry. Not about your eternal destiny, but if you went to a doctor. We had a lady, good lady, and she worked for us in our company a number of years ago, probably a couple of decades now. And she went to the doctor, was in fine health. She went to the doctor. She was having some kind of problems. And he examined her, and he said, you have got 60 days to live. I think she had stomach cancer. He said, you've got 60 days. 60 days to the day she went home to be with the Lord. And if you went to a doctor and he said, you're going to die, now you've got to be psychologically prepared, correct? Some years ago, I went to a doctor. I had cancer. And I had it right here. And so I'm in Ohio. I go to this doctor, and he cuts this little football. Now, you get to an age where you get basal cell cancer, like hang nails, okay, just take another one off. And he said, it's probably basal cell cancer, nothing to worry about. And so he takes this little football, because I'm from Ohio. And I want a football. And so he takes this little football off. And so, I'm patched up, and we jump in the truck, and off we go, because I've got to go to a meeting. And about 2 days later, we're about 400 or 500 miles away, and he calls me. Now, he's a little upset, and he says, you have to come back. And I said, I can't come back. I'm in a meeting. Well, then when it's over, you got to come back. I said, well, when it's over, I'm headed to another meeting. I said, why? He said, well, it's not basal cell cancer. It is serious. And he said, because I cut this football out, he said, I left cancer at 3 o'clock and at 9 o'clock because basal cell cancer would have died. This will not die. And he said, you still got cancer. And let's face it, though they've had a whole lot more, I don't want to say luck, they've had more progress in treating cancer. Still, when you hear you got it, you know what you think? I am cooked. I paid all of my horse racing debts and everything. But, and so what you do is, here's what you do. If you thought you were going to die, look, if you thought you were going to die 1 week from today, first off, you'd probably cancel your vacation plans. And you might just get in touch with some people. And you know what you do? If there's really somebody you love, what you would do is you would take all that you care about, and you would try to, you wouldn't do this. You wouldn't call somebody that you love and say, 77 years ago, our forefathers brought forth this new nation dedicated proposition. No. Here's what you would do. You would take all of the love, all of the compassion, all that you care for them, and you would kind of squeeze it and compress it down to as short a statement as you can, so that when you're gone, especially if like you were somebody they turned to in tough times, and now you're not going to be there the next time they have tough times, you would try to compress everything you have to as small a statement, so that the next time they go through some problems, maybe they could remember what you said, and that will get them through that tough time. We're going to look at the book of 2 Timothy. I don't know if you realize this, but this book is different than any book or epistle that the Apostle Paul wrote. It's not the longest. It is not the shortest. But let me tell you what this is. At this time, when Paul wrote this, he has been saved for 32 years. He has been preaching for 32 years. He has, do we not know, does history not tell us that he has traveled extensively? He says in Romans that he was going to go to Spain, all the way from Israel, he's going to go to Spain. Some say that he actually made it around the Iberian Peninsula, up into England. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But this man has traveled a lot. He wrote many epistles, and most of those epistles are written to what? They're written to a local church. To the church at Colossae, to the church at Philippi, to the church at Ephesus, to the church in Rome, correct? This is an epistle, but only 3 of them that he wrote, or 4 of them that he wrote. This is not written to a church, it's written to an individual. And what makes this one different than everything else, this is the last one he wrote. I don't know if you have dates in your Bible, but my date for this one is 66 AD. If you have dates, check all the rest. The next thing you'll see is maybe 65 AD, but everything else is going to be before 66. You know why? Because this is the last thing he wrote. You know where he is when he writes this? This guy's in prison. And I say this, guys, if the Lord tarries long enough, all of us are going to end up in a bed somewhere, be it in your home, in a hospice, in a hospital, in a nursing home. You're going to end up in a bed somewhere, unable to get out of the bed, walk across the room, and use the bathroom by yourself. And one of these days in that bed, one of those mornings, you're going to wake up, and you know what you're going to hear for the first time and last time in your life? You're going to hear death's footsteps coming down the hall, and you're going to know that your name is at the top of his checklist, and that you have, I say it this way, you're going to see one more sunrise than you see sunsets. And when you know that death is close, you don't have to worry about it spiritually because you're prepared for it, correct? But if there's somebody you care about, your kids, some family member, maybe somebody, don't we have people that go, oh man, they're like a son to me. They're like a daughter to me. And you're going to have somebody, you know what you're going to say? You're going to say, man, I got them through some tough times, but I will not be there the next time they go through hard times. That is where the apostle is. He is in prison. He knows this for sure. He doesn't know when he's going to die. They could come at any moment. The ink could have not been dry on this epistle when they came down to take him away and have his head cut off. But he knows this for sure. I will never see Timothy again. And he loved this kid like a son. And I don't know how many times Timothy went through some tough times, and maybe the Apostle Paul said, Tim, did you ever go through a tough time and you called somebody and they got you through the tough time? I wonder how many times Timothy did that with the Apostle Paul. But Paul knows this. For sure, Timothy will go through another tough time. As long as you're alive, you're going to go through them. And for sure, I won't be there to help him. So you know what he wanted to do? He wanted to take everything that he felt for this young man, and he wanted to compress it down to his shortest statement, that maybe if Timothy could commit this to his memory, that even after Paul is dead and he goes through some tough times, maybe Timothy would remember what Paul told him and it would get him through. And if you did that, if you could reduce it, think about this, to one word. Boy, if you could give all of the love, if you could reduce all of the love and all of the care and all of the instruction and all of the advice that you could give to somebody, think about that. Could you give somebody everything to urge them to keep on going and how to get through the tough times? Could you give it to them in one word? Now, I want to say this. If anybody can reduce great truths to one word, the Apostle Paul is the guy. Does he not give us a definition of grace like no one else? I don't believe you can show anybody and be talking to anybody about the grace of God without ending up in something this guy wrote. Is this not the man that explained to us about faith? He says in Romans chapter 4, you've got to have the faith like the faith of Abraham. I don't know if you think about what Abraham believed. No, he didn't believe looking forward to the cross. You know what he believed? He believed something that was crazy. He was an old man, and God said, see those stars? Yep, you're going to have more kids than that. Christmas is going to be expensive. Anyway, and you know what this old man said? I mean, he didn't say you're going to have, you're old, and your wife is old, and you're going to have a kid. He said you're going to have kids like the stars in the sky, like the sands of the sea. And you know what that old man said? He just heard one of the craziest things he ever heard, and he said, I believe you. And you know what you heard? You heard somebody tell you that a man who lived 2,000 years ago before your great-grandfather was even thought of, died on a cross, came back to life 3 days and 3 nights later, and that if you'll just take his death, burial, and resurrection as the payment for your sins, you get eternal life free. I'm sorry, guys, if you think about that, that's a crazy thing. But I believe it. Isn't that true? And so he taught us that we have the same faith of Abraham. We believe something that just sounded crazy. Is this not the man that said, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's? Is this not the man who gave us a definition of charity that the world still hasn't figured out? You know, even half of the Christians can't explain charity without just reducing it to a 4-letter word called love. It's not love, guys. It's charity. And this guy taught us about charity, gave us a whole little chapter in the Bible that just absolutely has defined description by others. This is the man who said, one of these days, you're going to take a stand. You can practice, you can study, but one of these days, he said, stand therefore. He is the one that told us that I know you want to live in peace, but there's going to be a time when you're going to have to wrestle with the powers that be. So if there's ever been a man who could put everything down in one word, this is the guy. And I am here to tell you, he does it again. I mean, he knocks it out of the park with this epistle. Because this is the last thing he wrote. He loved those churches, but he didn't write it to a church. He wrote it to a young man that he loved like a son. And he says a word in this epistle. And he says it over and over and over and over and over again. You know why? Because he's hoping I'll say this enough times to Timothy so that when I am dead and I am gone and he goes through some tough times and he goes through grief and he goes through sorrow and he goes through a time of fear or whatever, he'll remember the one word I left him. And that one word will get him through. And you know what we're going to do tonight? We're going to do something you've always wanted to do. We're going to read somebody else's mail. Didn't Paul, isn't an epistle a letter? So didn't Paul write this letter to Timothy? Okay, we're not in that loop. But it is now in public domain, and we can read it. And maybe, who knows what you're going to go through between now and the Lord coming back. Who knows what you're going to go through. And maybe the one word that the apostle gave to this guy that he loved like a son, maybe that one word that he gave him, the Lord will let you kind of wrap your heart around it. And the next time you go through a tough time, maybe it'll keep you going. You know, guys, I just want to get across the line. I've been saved for 48 years, preaching 48 years. That doesn't mean I won't quit tomorrow. You say, well, then what do you think is going to keep you going? Well, I don't know what it is, but I know one thing. This word that Paul gave Timothy, I hang on to it, guys. I got to tell you, I hang on to it. So we're going to look at this book and this epistle, and we're going to look at that word that the Apostle Paul gave to Timothy, and you can absorb it and claim it for your own if you want. Maybe help you through a tough time. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, begin at verse 1, he says this, now therefore, my son. He's not his son, but he is, isn't he? Loves him like a son. He said, now therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also. Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. Let's bow our heads and let's talk to the Lord. Father, we thank you for this book. I really believe this, God. I don't always try to speak for other people, but I believe this. I believe as I speak to you tonight, I speak for these people, and I believe when I say we, as a group, thank you for this book. God, we have no problem with this book tonight because there's nothing wrong with this book. And we have no problem with you tonight because there's nothing wrong with you. But if these folks are honest, God, they know, like me, they are a mess. We're just walking, talking pieces of dirt, and we stumble over our own feet trying to serve you. And we need you not just to save us from our enemies, but we need you to save us from ourselves. God, I don't know what anybody's going through tonight. I don't know what they're going to be going through a week from now, or a month from now, or a year from now, or whenever. But I know this. If we can absorb the word that Paul gave Timothy, it might help us get through our tough times like it probably helped Timothy get through his. after he went through a tough time, and Paul, his spiritual father, was already with you. So, God, I pray that you will speak to the hearts of these individuals, God. They don't have to hear from me, but they have to hear from you. And so, God, maybe in spite of them hearing me, they'll hear your words tonight, and they'll do something, God. It'll just be something that will help them along the way. In Jesus Christ's name I pray, amen. Let's read those 3 verses again. He says, "Now therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. And the things which thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also. Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ." And there is the word. Look at verse 3. "And thou therefore endure." Like no other epistle, he says, endure, 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 endure. He tells the apostle, or he tells his son Timothy 5 times in this book, you got to endure this, this. You say, why? Because guys, is there not a lot in life to endure? Life is filled with with problems, and are we not hearing about problems that are they're almost like outrageous? Some of the problems people have now, you can't be prepared for them. All you can do is endure them. And so I want to talk to you tonight about what you need to endure. The first thing he says here is endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. Now, when I hear that, here's what I think. The first thing I think of is we've all heard testimonies of some soldier, and he's in a battle, and he gets wounded, and even though he's wounded or even though he's hurt, he just struggles on, and carries the day. I don't know if you guys realize this, but during the Second World War, American territory was indeed invaded and occupied by the Japanese. Not one of the 48 states, but a state that we have now is Alaska. And out at the end of the Alaskan archipelago, the Aleutian Islands, the last 2 islands are Attu and Kiska. Believe it or not, they are 1,000 miles from the mainland of the United States. They're only 700 miles from Japan. And those 2 islands were invaded by the Japanese. They are volcanic. The weather there is horrendous. It's worse than Buffalo. And it's terrible. And so the Japanese had landed there, and then the Americans came, and the army landed. And here's the problem. It's all volcanic rock, great places to hide. And the Japanese have all the high ground, and the Americans have to attack uphill over lava, which if you fall down, you get tore up. And all the Japanese got to do is shoot downhill and throw grenades. And the army was being mauled. They were absolutely being mauled because of that. And there was one 19-year-old soldier, and after about 3 or 4 attempts to take this hill and being driven back, sometimes the guy just says, I had enough. And this kid grabbed a handful of hand grenades and started up this hill. He had his weapon with him, and he ran up on a Japanese machine gun nest, pull a pin, throw it in there, and finish off the survivors. Then he went to another one. Now, you say, well, how did he not get shot? He did get shot. He got shot numerous times, but he never stopped. He never stopped. He ran out of hand grenades. He took out about 7 different machine gun nests, got to the top of this hill. Of course, his army company followed him to the top. They'd carried the day. They now had their objective. And when he got to the top, they said, we've got the hill. And he said, okay, and died. And so when we think of endure hardness, that's kind of what we think of. But there's a similarity to something there, and I don't like to say this. I write the Fight On books, and they're about people that endure tough times. I never put athletes in there. I couldn't care less about an athlete, what he does. But have we not heard about football players, and they play with broken ribs? You're going to play a game where they hit you in the ribs with broken ribs? But there's guys that do it. Guys are going out with broken arms, broken ribs, and they play football. And if you're going to say this soldier kept on going and endured hardness when he was injured, then so did this football player. And I don't like that similarity, okay? But I'll tell you what, there is an endurance of hardness that a soldier has that it seems like nobody has and nobody wants anymore. You know what it is? A soldier has to take an order that does not have his best interest in mind. Now, I say this, and I'm sorry, because this is true about some of you, it's just got to be. Underneath, remember Superman? And no matter how he dressed like the mild-mannered Clark Kent, but underneath he had his Superman outfit, right? Well, all Americans, underneath whatever they're wearing, they've got the little T-shirt that says, it's all about me. That's how everybody is. Well, it's all about, well, what about me? Well, what do I get? Well, why didn't you figure me in? You know, I was telling somebody, I came to this church one time. I just gotten there, and I walked into the church, and this lady walked up, and she was upset. And she wasn't upset with me because I didn't get a chance to preach yet. And she goes, do you know what they did here? Well, I didn't, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. And I said, what? She said, she was indignant about this. She said, they painted the bathrooms and never asked me what color I thought they should be. And so as warm and compassionate as I could, I said, maybe they didn't care. Oh, no, I don't care. She's not voting me out. I'm leaving in 3 days, guys, okay? You know, sometimes the goal of my ministry is that if some of you before I came here been complaining about your preacher, when I go out of this door tonight, some of you are going to go, oh, preacher, we're so glad we have you. And guys, we don't like anything that doesn't have our first interest in mind. Do you understand that's what the contemporary church is all about? You know what this church is about? Basically, isn't this true? Somebody gets saved and they come in here and they want to please God. So you come to church and find out what you have to change to make God happy. Isn't that right? Guys, when I got saved, I was wearing clothes, you wouldn't believe them, and long hair. And when I came to church, I found out what I had to change to fit into the church to make God happy. But now those contemporary churches, they're not for God, they're for the people. Oh, what would you like? Oh, you'd like us to have rock and roll music? Well, if that makes you happy, and they'll change the church to please you. And so everybody thinks that I've got to be addressed. My concerns, no one's asked me how this is going to affect me. That's because nobody cares. Do you know how many soldiers have heard an order that meant their death? And knowing it meant their death, they went out and obeyed that order anyway. I know a Christian brother, he was in Vietnam. He was not saved when he was in Vietnam, but he was absolute grief to his commanding officer. Some of the things he did literally could have been constituted as war crimes. And he didn't get, prosecuted or anything, but he was nothing but trouble, nothing but trouble. And when those guys, whenever a squad or a platoon goes out on a patrol, you got to have a guy walk point. And the guy who walks point is basically the trip line. He's the first one shot. And that's how everybody knows there's enemy ahead. It's really a wonderful, warm, fuzzy thing. I get to walk point. But because that's a deadly place, they rotate. Everybody takes a turn walking point. I walked point yesterday. This guy's walking point tomorrow. This guy's walking point the next day. So that to kind of spread out that wonderful opportunity to get killed. And this guy was such a problem to his platoon leader that they went out on patrol and his leader said, walk point. So he walked point. And the next patrol they had, he went to that guy again and said, you're walking point. And he said, I walked point last time. He said, well, you're walking point this time too. So he walked point. They went out on another patrol and his platoon leader came to him and said, you're walking point. He said, I walked point the last 2 times. He said, yeah, and you're walking this time. And he said, every time we go out, you're walking point. He goes, why? He said, because if I'm lucky, they'll kill you. And then I won't have a problem anymore. That is exactly what he told him. He figured the enemy would get rid of his problem for him. Now, don't you think that'd be a good time? That's how you could tell he wasn't saved. If he was saved, he'd go, that's not fair. You know what he said? Yes, sir. And for the rest of his time in Vietnam, every single patrol, he is the guy out there that put his life on the line. He's the one that walked point, and he endured hardness as a good soldier. Let me tell you something, bucko. Had those Vietnamese killed him, he'd have been in hell right now. But he lived through Vietnam, and he came back here, and he got saved. And he's in church today. But, guys, we don't like any kind of decision. Come on, guys. Have you not been saved long enough that God has told you or made a decision or sent you down a path in some way in your life and you didn't appreciate it? You know, I told you the other day I'm going to give you a prayer. I'm going to give you a prayer tonight. You can use this prayer. I've used this many times, and it's one size fits all. And you can use it. It is okay if you say this to the Lord. I disagree with what you're doing in my life right now. It's not wrong to say that, but finish it with these words. But you're right. and I'm wrong. That's what you got. No matter what happens, you got to put that last part in there, because if you don't, like lightning bolts and things happen. And really, guys, come on. You know what I've said? I've said this to him. I've said, I don't appreciate what's going on in my life right now, but you're right and I'm wrong, and I don't even know why you're right, because I still think my idea is better. But he's right and you're wrong. I have prayed it this way. I am telling you, I have prayed it, I mean, so stinking mad, you could give me a glass of cold water and I'd boil it in my hand. And I have said this, I have said through gritted teeth, I highly disagree with what's going on in my life right now. But don't worry, I know who the idiot is in this picture. You say you haven't. Go ask God. I sure have. And guys, you know what? Look, he is not going to go, well, you know, I'd like you to do this, but would that make you happy if I have you do this? And well, if you don't want to do that, then we just won't have you do that. I'll have some real Christian do that. You know what he's going to do? He's going to do something in all of our lives. He's going to send us down a path. He's going to have something happen in our lives that he will benefit from, and we won't. And we can't stand the thought that this God, because you see, we think that God exists just to see to it that I have a pleasurable existence, when the exact opposite is true. We are alive to see to it that he has a pleasurable existence. Well, how am I supposed to give him a pleasurable existence? Endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. And just do what you're supposed to do and shut your mouth. And if you want to go complain to him, but finish it with, and I'm telling you, finish it with, you're right and I'm wrong. Okay? Now come on. You ever meet people that go, oh, whatever God does in my life, I'm happy with it. You're on drugs. I've had people talk to me. I say, are you on drugs? No. Well, get on them. Why? Well, that explains, at least you got an excuse for how stupid you are. Look at chapter 3. Chapter 3, look at verse 10. It says, but thou hast fully known my doctrine, manner of life, purpose, faith, long-suffering, charity, patience, persecutions, afflictions, which came unto me at Antioch, not the one in Syria, at Antioch and Iconium at Lystra, what persecutions I endured. Now, everybody has afflictions. Everybody has problems in life. That's where, you know, you just trip and you fall and you twist your knee and you got to have surgery or something like that. That's affliction. Persecution, the difference between affliction and persecution is bad things that happen in your life, but they're not just life. This is grief that is aimed at you by somebody that is intentionally trying to hurt you. Now, when we think of persecution, we think of Christian persecution, but really, you will be persecuted not for your Christianity, not always. Sometimes somebody in the family doesn't like you. I know that's hard for you to believe, but somebody doesn't like you, they just give you grief. Sometimes it is someone at work that doesn't like you. May not be your testimony. It may be that you're in a position to get promoted to a higher position, and there's somebody else that is in competition for that promotion, and so they kind of sabotage your work and persecute you so that maybe you don't get that promotion. Now, it may be. Sometimes it's even in church. Somebody just gives you a hard time. You know, when I was in Bible college, like your pastor did, I was in construction, built houses. And there was a guy in there. I know it's going to be hard for you to believe. He didn't like me. Well, a lot of them didn't like me. This guy kind of made a career out of it. And one day, I got done working, and I walked out, and sticking out of the sidewall, not the tread, out of the sidewall of my front tire was an 8-penny finishing nail. Now, this was a 1967 Dodge Dart. It had like 8 horsepower, I think 3 foot-pounds torque. You couldn't get it downhill fast enough to crank the wheel over and have that tire roll over and pick up a nail, okay? This was plainly, somebody went out there and drove it in the side of my tire. To this day, I think it was that guy, okay? But here's the problem with a nail in a sidewall. They can't repair sidewalls. You got to have a new tire. And I'm in Bible college. We got coolie wages, okay? I mean, you know, we fasted because we didn't have the food. We just blamed it on God, so we tried to get something spiritual from it. But guys, you say, well, it wasn't fair. Yes, what'd you do? Went out and bought a new tire. You say, why? Because you have to endure persecution. And I look at us. I mean, look at you guys. I like, you know, I got some of my Baptist brethren. I think if they have not been hit in the head too much, they need to get hit in the head some more. I've had guys say this. I don't like them soft pews. I like them old hard benches. And I said, that's because you're nuts. I like padded pews. I do. I like central heat and central air. I love a heated baptistry. You ever heard anybody tell me, when they baptized me, bless God, they broke the ice on the pond. With your head. You may not think this is very noble, but if I'd have gotten saved in January and they said, we're going to break the ice on the pond so we can baptize you, I'd say, I tell you what you do, you just sprinkle me, I'll be a Methodist till July. We'll get a little heat in that water, okay? Hey guys, I am a product of my environment. I like stuff that is soft. And then you got to get persecuted. What is persecution to us? Somebody sat in your seat in church. I have had it happen, guys. I'm preaching in a meeting. I'm sitting out there. And I've had a church member in the church that I'm supposed to be bringing revival to, and they'll walk up and go, you're sitting in my seat. And I said, well, here you go. You can have it. I mean, that's how I know they need a revival. I sometimes have a vision of a 21st century Christian standing in line to receive their rewards for what they've gone through for God. And they just happen to be standing between some 13th, 14th century Christian. And I can just see this guy from like the 13th century. He turns around with this little guy with his bow tie and his pencil pants and his sister's socks on. And I can just see this guy turn around and go, they burned me alive. You know, one of those guys, they didn't put him on a stake and burn him alive. They put him on a spit and put him over the fire. And they're roasting him alive. And he was over this fire for 30 minutes. And he looked over at the guys who were doing it. He says, you can turn me over now. I'm done on this side. Whoa. I don't even want to meet that guy in heaven, okay? You and I have never gone through. We've never had what that guy has. And I can just see this guy turn around, this little Mr. Bowtie Christian, and go, they burned me at the stake. They drowned my wife. They raised our children to be pagans. What did they do to you? I went door knocking, and I knocked on his door, and this guy, I told him who I was with, and they slammed the door right in my face. You call that persecution? Now look, I'm not looking for any, okay? But you know what the thing about persecution is? It isn't fair. It isn't something that happens with life. It is something, sometimes it's not even what they do that hurts so bad. It is the thought that somebody wants to hurt you, that somebody wants to cause you grief. Just that alone. You say, well, yeah, preacher, what do I do? You have to endure it. You just have to endure it. Well, I want it to stop. Well, who doesn't? Oh, yeah, I love persecution. Could somebody whip me? I'd be out of your mind. But this guy said, man, he said, they beat me 3 times, 39 stripes. Man, they've done all kinds of things. They try to kill me. So what did he do? He endured it. You know what he said? He said, Tim, they're going to do it to you too. I got news for you, bucko. If you're not in some way, I don't say they got to beat you. Don't go out and try to get persecuted. But if in some way you haven't displeased the devil to where he does something in your life to at least try to trip you up, what on earth have you been doing? You think that the battery's gone dead early in the remote is persecution. And guys, you have to endure persecution. Look at verse 4, or chapter 4, verse 1. Paul says, I charge thee therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who shall judge the quick and the dead, at his appearing in his kingdom. Preach the word. Be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. Now, I don't know if you ever thought about this, but in verse 3, the Apostle Paul prophesies. You know what prophecy is? Isn't prophecy, here's something that's not happening now that will happen in the future? Isn't that prophecy? Look what he says. For the time will come. Then what he's about to tell us is not going on in Paul's day. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. But after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned to fables. Then the Apostle Paul said that one of these days they. Now, do you know, when you say, I want to be in the Bible, you're in it. You're the they. There is a spirit in our world that you and I'm not talking about somebody outside this building. Yes, somebody outside this building, but people inside this building. It's the same spirit. We breathe the same air. And there's a spirit afoot in our around our globe that we don't want to. There's something in me. I don't want to endure sound doctrine. Now, I'm not telling you that that's how I wake up in the morning, but I'm telling you that spirit is around. I'll explain. First time I was in evangelism, it was right after I graduated from Bible college, and I was in evangelism from 1973 to 1978 for 5 years. During that time, if I asked 10 pastors, what's the main problem you have? Out of 10 guys, I'd probably get 8 different answers. Somebody would say, oh, well, the last pastor kind of messed up morally, and we've got to live that down. The next guy would say, well, you know, when I took this church, it was monetarily in debt. Somebody else would say, well, we don't have a building, and we need a building badly, and we don't have any money for it. Somebody else would say, well, there's a guy in a church, he's trying to run me out. I mean, I'd get a couple of repeats, but out of 10 guys, I'd get 8 different answers. If I asked 10 pastors today, what's your problem? 8 of them would give me the same answer. And it's 2 steps. They would say, I can get them saved and can't get them into church, and I can't get my people to do what they should, what they know they should. A few years back, I was preaching in Australia, in an Australian church, with an Australian pastor. And I asked him, I said, what are the problems you have in your ministry here in Australia? Because they're different, And he said, well, Aussies are different than Americans. And I said, yeah. And he said, our culture is different. Our countries are different. Yep. And he said, so my problems are going to be different. They're not going to be the same as an American pastor. And I said, yeah, that's why I'm wondering what you have to go through. And he said, well, basically, I only have 2 problems. His exact words, I can get people saved and can't get them into church, and I can't get my people to do what they know they should. And that was a revelation for me, because that's when I realized this is not an American thing. This is a generational thing. And let me tell you what else is generational. According to the apostle, there is a spirit where you and I do not want to endure sound doctrine. You would say, what do I do? Well, you can do one of 2 things, change the doctrine or endure sound doctrine. Think about this. If you won't endure sound doctrine, you know what that means you will endure? Unsound doctrine. Isn't that true? Hey, I got news for you. If there was ever a time to start a church with a crazy doctrine, this is it. 100 years ago, you'd never get off the ground. Today, you could come up with the craziest thing. Let's come up with something that's so stupid nobody with their right mind would believe it. Let's just say, I'm going to start teaching that we're going to go halfway through the tribulation. You know that 50 years ago, 100 years ago, nobody would buy that? In fact, that doctrine was invented in 1970. It wasn't around 50 years ago. And so can I confess something? I have to tell you this. I've always wanted to start my own church. No, I don't mean, Bible Believers Baptist Church or whatever it is. I mean, I want to start like my own, weird church. There's a passage in the Old Testament that talks about the latter growth. And I want to start the church of the latter growth. And in that church, all of the men will have mullet haircuts. That will be the latter growth. Now, see, you guys are laughing. But if I started it tomorrow, a year from now, I'll have people follow me. You say, why? Because today we don't endure sound doctrine. And I talk to people. I knew of a pastor, and he said, I'm going to take Baptist off the name of my church. And he had a missionary in his church. And the guy said, okay. And they were good friends. He said, okay, I'm leaving. He goes, why? He said, we're still going to baptize them when they get saved. We're still going to believe what we believe. He said, I'm just taking Baptist off the name because I'm tired of fighting over the name Baptist. He said, I'm leaving because you think this is a final decision. And I think you're just starting down a road and you don't know where it's going to end. You know what that guy found out? He was tired of fighting over the name Baptist. Then pretty soon he was tired of fighting about good music. Then he got tired of fighting about standards. Then he got tired of fighting about the King James Bible. That church that he had is now a contemporary church. He himself doesn't pastor it because he's out of the ministry, which where I personally think is where he belongs. You say, what was the problem? Wouldn't endure sound doctrine. And we have these people, you know, they go, well, I believe this. You know, you believe in salvation by grace, right? Yeah, except for somebody that you like a lot. Well, I believe salvation by grace, but you know, my 81-year-old grandmother wouldn't hurt a fly. She wouldn't hurt a fly because she's 81. She's not fast enough to hurt a fly. Let me tell you what you do. If you think somebody 81, you know, they don't deserve hell, go back and take that 8 and that 1 and reverse them and follow your grandmother around for a weekend when she was 18. You'll know why she deserves hell. Well, you know, our son is gay, and we just love him anyway. You're not enduring sound doctrine. First off, your son is not gay. Why would you use such a nice word for such a horrible thing? Oh, I know why. Because your real pastor, CNN, told you to use that word. And I know I won't be graphic, but if you ever saw two homosexuals in action, you would not say, "My, aren't they gay?" You'd say, "Isn't that sick? Isn't that perverted? Isn't that abnormal? Isn't that queer?" That's what you would say. And when you say, "Well, we just love him anyway," no, you don't. You love yourself more than you love Jesus Christ. And you don't want to pay the price of having to separate yourself from somebody whose lifestyle is called in the Bible an abomination. Hey, I'll give you a doctrine. Some of you young people, you young parents, you know what that book says? You want your kids to be saved? You want your kids to be saved? I do. I follow Scripture. Know what it says? Beat them with a rod. You'll deliver their soul from hell. Woo-hoo, I had the best time dealing with my boys' hearts. And it wasn't their heart that I was slapping on, okay? But here's the look, I am telling you, I am seeing 20s and 30s in our churches. They're King James Bible believers, and they won't spank their children. Because you're believing the psychology of the world, and you're not enduring sound doctrine. But I just can't stand to hear them cry. I just used to say it this way to my boys. Son, you don't want to lose all your baby teeth on the same day. My boys thought a timeout was how long they were unconscious. We don't endure sound doctrine. You know what you're going to have to do? Endure sound doctrine. You know what I'm seeing? Think about this. This book here says there's 3 things. Now, guys, you understand, I don't care what you want. I watch Christian TV. No, you don't. You watch a Christian program on worldly TV, okay? And I don't care what you watch, nothing in this natural world is going to feed you properly spiritually. There's only 3 ways you get something spiritual into you. Again, Timothy said this to Paul. Or Paul said this to Timothy. He said, "Till I come, give attendance to reading, exhortation, and doctrine." Reading the Bible. Exhortation, preaching. Doctrine, it is the foundation that you build yourself on. And I'm coming to churches where our young people, our 20s, are drifting off doctrinally because you think they just absorb doctrine by sitting here. And that's not happening. They've got to be taught doctrine. And so, guys, you need to endure sound doctrine. Look at verse 5. "But watch thou in all things, endure afflictions." Now, I told you the difference between persecution and affliction, they're both bad. But persecution wouldn't have even happened. It's something bad that would not have happened to you if somebody didn't do it to you. Affliction, there's a word for it. Life. Just happens. You fall down, you get sick, whatever it is. And you think, well, I thought when I got saved, yeah, I know, you thought that, your car would get better mileage, you'd never get the hiccups anymore, your mother-in-law wouldn't visit. Nothing bad could ever happen again. No, there's a 4-letter word that we all have to put up with. Life. And with life comes affliction. And you know what you have to do? Endure it. You just got to put up with it. This book about chronic illness. Some people have chronic illness. My wife and I, her youngest brother, is a preacher, pastor, and his wife has lupus. It has absolutely devastated her. Absolutely. They had a child, and they were expecting their first child, and she miscarried. So they were expecting their second child, and she miscarried. They're expecting their third child. Everybody's waiting for the inevitable, but instead she brought that child to full term and gave birth. You know how excited after 2 miscarriages, how excited you're about finally having a little baby boy? And my brother-in-law said the night my son was born, I went down to the nursery. You know how good it is to see somebody with your last name on it in that little nursery. And he said, not only was I excited about my child, but he said there's all kinds of babies in the nursery, but all the doctors and nurses were paying attention to mine. They must have been excited too. He said, then they lifted him up and they put him in a special incubator. You know, you have 4 chambers in your heart, and sometimes people are born with a little hole in the wall. And they looked at that baby, and they came out the night he was born, and they came to my brother-in-law and said, sometimes children have a hole in the wall, but your child has no wall at all. There are no 2 upper chambers in his heart. There's only 1 chamber. Blood is not going to his lungs. He's not getting oxygen. He will not live through this night. You know how you feel when you have to go tell your wife that the child she just gave birth to will be dead by morning? And he took that news and went to his wife and explained to her, our child will not live through the night. That child is 28 years old today. That boy has had so many surgeries. Children with that condition, they were actually able to reroute blood and everything, but none of them ever lived past 9 years old. He's 20. Every day he lives, he makes medical history. He is married, and I am telling you, this kid, if there's somebody that had a legitimate reason, or excuse, not reason, but excuse to shake his fist at God and say, you shouldn't have done this, that kid could do it. He's never done it. He has got the sweetest Christian attitude, the sweetest Christian testimony. He is one of the nicest young men, one of the most godly young men. But it's affliction, do you understand? But if he couldn't run from this pulpit to that door there. His lips would turn blue. He would be gasping for breath. Every now and then they have to rush him to the hospital because he just has his heart has a hiccup and they've told him, they said, they have literally, if he took off his shirt, he would look like the road map of New York State. He's got scars running all over his chest, over his shoulders. They have rewired him, replumbed him, and they've told him, they said, there is nothing more we can do for you. He knows that he could be dead next week. But boy, he is sure living this week for God. You say, why? Because he's enduring affliction. And sometimes you have a physical problem. You have a sickness. I'm sorry. Guys, I'm on your side. You understand? And sometimes that's what it is. You have to endure it. Sometimes you have to endure pain. That's what I do. And I try to ignore it, but it's been 45 years. I've had a headache since October 2015 every single day. Last night, I didn't get to sleep until 4:30. Because part of the problem with my neck is it gives me insomnia, and I don't sleep. But you say, well, what do you do that? You endure it. You just keep on going. You say, well, I don't want it. Well, I don't want it either. But you keep on going because that's what you do. You know, I tell people this. You listen to Brother Caesar play the piano, and I've been listening to your pianists, several of them, and they're so good. And I can't play anything except maybe the radio. But I can. That's really not true. There is a musical instrument that I am very proficient at. The same one you can play. Oh, no, preacher, no, I can't play anything else. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. The violin. You know when you know you're in trouble? When you see somebody go, how are you doing? And they go, how am I doing? Wait a minute. And they open up the violin case, and they put up, how am I doing? tell you how I'm doing. That's okay. I really didn't want to know. You know, I ask people, that's my line. I ask people, how are you doing? Because I want to know. But there's just some folks you don't say those words to. You know you're in trouble when you say, how are you doing? And they start with their kid's second dirty diaper and the kid is 50. This is going to be a long story, bucko. This is going to be a reality TV program that never ends. I was in a church and I asked this lady, she's coming out, she shakes my hand. I said, how are you doing? That was the wrong thing to ask. She told me and told me and told me and told me. And then the next night she's leaving. And without thinking, I shake her hand and I go, I said this. I said, how are you doing? I went, oh. I said, why did I ask you? You're going to tell me. Hey, so what do you do? Keep on going. Just got to keep on going. And nobody wants to hear about your little sore toe. Nobody wants to hear about your toothache. I'm sorry, guys. Listen, I'm telling you. I am made of the same dirt that you are made of. I am made of the same flesh. I feel the pain like you feel the pain. I'll feel your pain. I don't feel your pain. I don't want your pain. I got my own. But nobody wants to hear somebody that's whining all the time. You understand? So what do? Shut up. Really, shut up. Sometimes you've just got to practice not letting it be seen. But you got to endure hardness. You got to endure that. You got to endure the affliction. Maybe it's grief. Let me tell you what my wife and I have never done. You know, when you're in a ministry, there is a temptation that comes upon you actually unforeseen. Someone will go through some great grief, and you'll tend to say this, I know how you feel. No, you don't. You know, I was with a family not long ago, their house burnt down. They say, beside the death of a loved one, the second greatest emotional trauma is to have your house burned down. We've never had a house burned down. And so if I hear somebody, their house burned down, I go, I know how you feel. No, I don't. I don't. I'd never say that. The greatest trauma is to bury a child. We have never buried any of our children. I did think about one of them in particular several times. Anthills came to mind. But really, you know what? There are people that have buried children. And I am not justifying them getting out of church, but I understand that their heart is ever broken. I understand why the day that child died is always an anniversary that they don't like to have to keep, but it's one they can't put out of their mind. You say, well, yeah, what do you do with that grief? You endure it. Just keep on going. I'm sorry, but you can't get out. You got to keep on going. Maybe it's not grief. Maybe it's discouragement. You know, we got a strange generation, this Generation Y. And I thought my kids were from Generation Y, because every time I told them something, they go, why? But I thought Generation X was bad. But Generation Y is Generation X with their brains beat out. I heard they were interviewing a child psychologist about Generation Y. He said they are the most inept generation we have ever had. They can't do anything, especially if the computer's down. And he said this, but they have the highest self-esteem of any generation in history. That means that they can't do anything and they're proud of themselves for it. And he said they all believe this. He said they all believe that someday there will be a reality TV program about their life. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, there already was. When I was a kid. Came on every night at 11 o'clock when the network shut down and they put up this thing called a test pattern and it just went, he said, that's boring. That's their life. And you know what? This one took me off guard. That entire generation is bitter. Now, I don't know how you look at this. I have examined bitterness. I can only see two things that cause a person to be bitter. Reduced to the simplest statement, you get bitter when you get bad that you don't believe you had coming. Or you don't get good that you think you had coming. There have been men, they worked faithfully for a company, and then they got slighted through a promotion or something, and then they didn't get the good they thought they deserved, and from that day on, they started stealing from the company. They started complaining about their job. They got bitter. Or you get people that, you know, guys, if you go home tonight and your house burns to the ground while you're in here, you know what some of you are going to do? Somebody will walk out of this church and say, I went to church and my house burnt down and I was doing something good. I'm not going back. Something bad happened you think had coming. And I thought, how can a generation that is in their 20s be bitter? And then I realized, all about me. They think that everything good should happen to them. They're the generation that somebody says, you need to have a dream. To which I say, nah. Kill the dream. Get rid of your dream. I'm telling you, don't get a dream. Get a vision. See, what's the difference between a dream and a vision? If a person has a vision, a visionary has a vision. If his vision comes to fruition, other people are blessed by it. Do you know why we are sitting in this room right now? Because we can see each other. And we can see each other because some guy had a vision of an electric light. And when his vision was accomplished, did we not all benefit from it? Did a couple of bicycle mechanics in Ohio have a vision that something heavier than air could fly? And they launched aircraft. And tomorrow morning I'll get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and catch one of those infernal machines. But guys, we've all benefited from it. Oh, I've never even flown on an airplane. I haven't benefited from it. Yes, you have. Somebody sent you something airmail, or you got something, or you sent something airmail. We've all benefited from it. Their vision came true, and somebody else benefited from it. You know, in my generation, a lot of kids got polio. And some guy had a vision that he could come up with a vaccine that would inoculate a generation. And I remember taking those vaccines. I had a good friend of mine, and he never walked without crutches because he got polio. And I walked without crutches because I never got polio. You say, why? Because some guy had a vision, and his vision came to fruition, and other people benefited. The difference between a visionary and a dreamer. When a dreamer dreams, if their dream comes true, it's usually a movie, and it's all about them, and they're the hero. They're the one that saves somebody from a burning building, stops the terrorists, pulls somebody out of a car sinking in the lake. Dreamers only dream about exalting themselves. We've got an entire generation that, you know what they think? You know why they're bitter? Because they thought that when they stepped out of high school, they're going to go, world, here I am. And the whole world looked over and said, so what? And went on. I'm ready to bless your company. Yeah, and you are. You don't work for us. And they're discouraged. Boy, life is hard on dreams. You know how many people are doing things, and you know what it is? They're doing some menial job that they got while they tried to accomplish their dream, and 30 years later, they'll start doing the menial job. You say, what do? You endure it. Just got to endure it. I'm sorry, it's got to endure it. Guys, just let me tell you something. If you don't have illness, if you don't have pain, if you haven't had grief, if you haven't had discouragement, let me give you one. No one here will escape. Age. Oh, man, we're all getting old. Last week I had a birthday. I am now, I think, 1,000. You know what my view of life is? You know these people get up, oh, life is a challenge. Yeah. I'm going to get out of bed and try to stand up. Then I'm going to walk and try not to fall down. And I'm going to feed myself and not stab myself in the face. That's a great day for me. Okay? You know my vision of life? Life is a polished granite wall on a 45-degree angle. And today's goal is just to hook a fingernail to slow my descent into the abyss. Well, that doesn't sound exciting. Did I say it was exciting? It's not exciting at all. But you can't do anything about it. Can I tell you, young people, look, I'm going to give you some advice, okay? You young guys? You're going to find this out anyway. After you're 50, every night while you're asleep, your body tries to kill you. And the downside of that is that it takes you an entire day to get over the trauma of that attempt. And just when you do, you got to go back to bed. You know what? You know how you know when you're getting old? You get pain where you didn't even know you had parts. You know, would you ever do this? You're talking to your husband or your wife, and you go, what do I have here that hurts? What is here? We got the doc. Doc, what do I have here? Because whatever it is, mine hurts. I believe this. I believe that we're all born with pain glands that never develop till you hit 50. And buddy, when they come online, they make up for lost time. You ladies, you know how you know when you're getting old? When putting away the breakfast cereal is a 2-step process. Oh. Right? Man, age will do it to you. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day. I just saw this guy. I couldn't remember his name. And I'm going, I can't remember his name. And I thought, wait a minute, I can't remember mine. But that's kind of a benefit. But you know what you're going to have to do? So what do? You endure it. Just got to get through it. Man, there's pain, there's parts. You know, people say, old age ain't for sissies. Well, I got news for you. If you're a sissy, yes, it is. Because I'm a sissy. And I'm old. And it happens. So what do? Keep on going. You know, everybody, I like these guys. Remember the 70s? Guys get up and they go, I get out of bed every morning. And I go to the window and I say, perhaps today. Yes, the Lord may come back, perhaps today. And every morning I get out of bed, I clutch my chest, and I go, perhaps today. I was telling your pastor, I was riding with a pastor friend of mine. I've known him for years. Good friend. He's had heart problems. I'm preaching for him. He's driving. And he looks over me. He's got kind of a worried look. He goes, you know something, brother? He said, I got kind of a tightness in my chest. I said, you think you're having a heart attack? He goes, I don't know. I said, well, I just want to let you know. I said, if you do, and you need mouth to mouth, you're a dead man. I said, you see these lips? These lips will never touch your lips. If you feel yourself slipping away, tell me what you want me to tell your widow, pal. I'm teaching in my class in college. I said, guys, I'm telling you, if I ever drop on this floor clutching my chest, don't you dare come up and put your mouth on my mouth. Let me die with some dignity. Now, you girls, give it a try. But I am telling you, guys, I mean, come on. You can't get away from it. We've all been here longer than we were supposed to be here. Isn't that true? And I know the Bible says you got 70 years, and you know, and I know people live older than 70 years, but I got news for you. After 70 years, the warranty's up. Harder to get parts. So what do? Endure affliction. Now there just might be, I said, listen, it says, endure hardness as a good soldier, endure persecution, endure sound doctrine, endure afflictions, and there just might be a little Teflon Christian here who says, preacher, you haven't even touched me yet. Nothing you've said applies to me. Good. That's why I love the Bible. Go to chapter 2. And the apostle says this, therefore I endure all things. Say, what are all things? Things that are unique and unforeseen. Things that a preacher couldn't think to put in a message to tell you to endure them. What I'm telling you is that somebody can say, watch out for this, watch out for this, watch out for this, watch out for this, watch out. You know what? Guys go to Bible college and they're taught all these things about how to pastor a church. You have no idea. They get out of Bible college and then they go, man, I started pastoring this church. You know what happened? Oh, nobody ever told me that was coming. Yep. Something is around the corner. It's going to bring you to your knees. It'll either bring you to your knees because you're in pain, or it'll bring you to your knees because you're in grief, or it'll bring you to your knees because it'll finally get you praying. But you have to endure all things. Now, I am a car guy. I like cars, okay? I'm not a golfer. I am not a fisherman. When I fish, it's just worm murder. But I like cars. And I had somebody, they assumed something and they were wrong. They said, you like cars? Yeah, so you must like NASCAR. I said, no, I don't like NASCAR. Well, why not? I said, because I'm just like NASCAR. I've been going around for years. I've been going around in circles as fast as I can, and they're getting paid way more than I am. But I did hear this one time. They win races, but that's not the big deal. The big deal is that at the end of the year, there's a NASCAR champion, correct? Like I was telling somebody the other day, some football teams get to the Super Bowl and lose, and lose, and lose. And they represent it with their name. Boy, I love losing Super Bowls. Bills. See, I told you to be glad I left. But I heard about this NASCAR guy, and I get this. This guy became the NASCAR champ, and that year, he never won one race. He never won a race. But he finished every race, and he finished second and third and third and second and second and second and third, and he actually scored more points. He tallied more points throughout the year. Say why? He just endured. I mean, if you don't win a race, you know what you're sure of? I'm not going to be the champ this year. He was a champ. I'll tell you two things and I'll be done, little illustrations. I was preaching in Norfolk, Virginia about 25 years ago. Big Navy base there. And this church I was preaching in had several sailors there, and this ship was in, and so that, even more guys were there. And the ship that was in port, this guy says, I want to take you down and show you my ship. It was the USS Eisenhower. That is a 5,000 crew aircraft carrier. And we went down there, and there was something unique about it that no other ship in the Navy was like. It wasn't particularly good. But here's what happened. They leave Norfolk, Virginia, and in those days, that was the days when the Soviet Union was still around, and they went out across the Atlantic for a med cruise, 6 months in the Mediterranean, and watching the Soviets at that time. Well, first off, they got to go across the Atlantic, and some of the storms of the Atlantic, literally, guys, they have waves that are 50 feet tall. Literally, it's not even the impact of the wave. It is the weight of the water falling on something that destroys it. And yet, and I don't know if you realize this, but guys die in peacetime in the military. Many, many guys have been buried, and it was training accident. Guys washed off the ship, washed overboard and never found. I knew a guy that was on an aircraft carrier, and he was a flight crewman. He was one of those guys that was supposed to take care. He had a jet, he had a pilot, and that was his job to take care of it. And his job was to break the guy loose. They have wheel cocks there to hold them steady. And he said at the time, the planes that the Navy had, it was the F-4 Phantom and the A-4 Skyhawk. And he said, my pilot was in an A-4. He was an A-4 pilot. And he said, we had two jets, an A-4 and a Phantom. And he said they were going up to there's two catapults to launch. And he said they're slowly taxiing up to the catapults. And he said at the same time, just ironically, coincidentally, their nose wheels hit those cables. That cable that stops those planes is 3 inches round. And he said when their nose wheels hit that, because they're moving along slowly, it stopped both planes, which means both guys had to throttle up. So at the same time, 3 jet engines go to a little higher throttle setting, really start blowing some exhaust out the back. And he said it was hitting us hard, and my plane is just literally shuddering. The only thing keeping it on deck is the wheel cocks. And he said, at that time, the deck manager or the deck boss looks over at me and he says, break him loose. He's next to Cat. And I looked over and said, no, I can't break him loose. That'll blow him off. And he said, break him loose. And he said, no, I can't. And he said, my pilot looked down. He said, what's the problem? He said, he wants me to break you loose. He said, then break me loose. He said, I pulled the wheel cocks, and he said, I watched as my plane, the exhaust lifted that plane up. And he said he flipped it over off of the deck, and he said, I saw him go for his ejection, but it was upside down. He just blown him into the water. He rode that plane to his death all the way to the bottom of the ocean. Peacetime. This guy said the Eisenhower, they went out across the Atlantic, went through all those storms, and nobody died. He said they got into the Med. Now, you know, an aircraft carrier, we for years lived in a motor home. And my motor home that I have is about the size of a Greyhound bus. I like cars. Do you know what it's like to drive something that the handling characteristics are described with words like plow and wallow? The steering wheel on a motorhome is just there for a suggestion. Let's go over here. And it says, whoa, okay. And you get these people, they cut around you with a sports car. Well, a destroyer is the sports car, and the aircraft carrier is the big lumbering motorhome. And what the Soviets would do is they would take those destroyers and just dart across the path, trying to cause them grief. Sometimes they'd hit. And he said they played tag with the Soviets for 6 months. Never had a problem. Nobody died. No planes crashed. No fires. 6 months is up. Now they're headed back to Norfolk, back across the storms of the Atlantic again. Came through just fine. They're coming down the channel. They are 400 yards from where he's going to berth that ship. He's going to be, the tugs are going to push him in, and a 6-month flawless med cruise is about to go in the books. And 400 yards from port, as they're coming down the channel, there was another ship at anchor, and it began to drift into the path of the USS Eisenhower, and the very prow, the pointed bow of that ship went out and engaged the port side of the Eisenhower, and as the Eisenhower went by, it raked the entire length of the Eisenhower, did over $2 million worth of damage, and that captain lost his command. You say, well, that's not fair. He wasn't home yet, bucko. The cruise isn't over for 400 more yards. And just when you think, oh man, I got this thing in the bag, no, there's still 400 yards. He didn't endure. Guys, you know what? The Lord might come back tomorrow. He might come back a week from now, but there's still time for you and me to screw this whole thing up. Now I'll tell this and I'll be done. I read a book a number of years ago, if you're interested, and it was about a Green Beret. You know what those guys are, Special Forces, Green Berets, in Vietnam. And in 1963, his name was James Nicholas Rowe, Lieutenant James Nicholas Rowe. He was Special Forces. In 1963 in Vietnam, the Special Forces, the Green Berets, actually were advisors. What they would do is they'd take 4 Green Berets and they would put them with an entire company of South Vietnamese soldiers. Now in Vietnam, the South Vietnamese soldiers did not have one enemy, but 2. Here's Vietnam. The cuff of my shirt is the DMZ, and South Vietnam is down here, and North Vietnam is up here. And the South Vietnamese army would have to fight the North Vietnamese army. But those were people that lived in the north and came south and invaded them. But there were also South Vietnamese communists. They were known as the Viet Cong, and they would also fight them. And he said it was in 1963. He said the company that I was with, the Vietnamese company that I was with, was overrun by a company of Viet Cong, South Vietnamese communists. And he said we were overrun, and he said the 4 of us were captured. And he said one of the guys died, but the other 3 of us were kind of POWs there. And I'll tell you where they took them. We all in this country, the Mississippi Delta is famous. It's where the Mississippi River comes down and goes into the Gulf, and it goes out with those fingers where the sediment finally settles, and it puts fingers out in the ocean, and it's swampy. Well, that's the same thing happens with the Mekong Delta, the Mekong River. And he said they had a camp down in these swamps of the Mekong Delta. And he said they took us there and they made us prisoners. He said, first off, he said, we weren't even worried. He said they'd already captured 3 other Green Berets. They kept them for 3 months. And then as a good faith gesture to the United States, they turned them back to the United States. And he thought, they'll keep us 3 months, 6 months. 5 years to freedom. That's the name of the book. He was a prisoner for 5 years. You know what they told him? They said, you think you'll go home when the war is over. We can keep you a long time after the war is over. Now, believe it or not, you get these visions of what a prison camp is like with barbed wire and machine gun towers and people trying to tunnel. No. There wasn't a fence around it. They could walk away anytime they wanted to. Rowe escaped 3 different times. The guy was a trained jungle fighter and couldn't find his way out. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with him. This was some bad place. In fact, he said the 3rd time that he escaped, he said, I was so glad because I made it. This time I knew I made it. And he said, I went through some bushes, and he said, when I stepped through, here sitting around a campfire are a bunch of South Viet Cong. And he said, I had to think fast. And he went, maybe you guys could help me? I'm an American POW, and I was out gathering firewood, and I got lost. Could you help me get back to my prison camp? Oh, sure. They didn't know he escaped. They took him back. You know what they told every one of those prisoners? You want to go home? Yeah, we want to go home. Want to go home tomorrow? Yeah. Can we go home tomorrow? Sure can. And they put a letter in front of them. And that letter said something to the effect that the Vietnam War is an illegal war. America is perpetrating a war crime on the people of South Vietnam. I am a war criminal, and I apologize to the Vietnamese people. And if they would just denigrate this country and sign a letter that says this nation is wrong, unlike Decatur, who said, America, my country. In her intercourse with other nations, may she always be right, but right or wrong, my country. And if they would just say, my country was wrong, they could go home. They wouldn't sign the letter. He said there were never more than about 4 of us. But he said, you know what happened? He said, first off, he said they'd make us listen to Hanoi Hannah. Hanoi Hannah was the communist woman on the radio that would propaganda. And he said, that wasn't so bad. He said, first off, he said, when we were captured, we figured the army will come and rescue us. The army didn't come and rescue them. The very army that they were a member of abandoned them. And he said, about 1967, they quit letting us listen to Hanoi Hannah, and instead, they just piped live the college demonstrations, the anti-war demonstrations going on in the United States. And he said, not only has my army abandoned me, but the country that I am fighting for has abandoned me. And he said, guys would get so down, he said the worst thing that would happen is a guy would lose the will to live. And he said, when a guy lost the will to live, he'd quit eating, and he'd just lay there, and he'd say, it's hopeless, never going to go home, I'm never going to see my wife again, I'll never see my kids again, I'm going to die. And he'd die. And he said, the only thing we could do is the 3 of us, we would boost him. And we would say, no, hang on, this war will be over, and you will go home, and you will see your children grow up, and you will have a life, and you will be with your wife. He said if they could get it through to him, they would get through that, and then they would live. And if they couldn't get through to it, they'd die. When he was captured, he weighed 190 pounds. By the day he escaped 5 years later, he weighed 120 pounds. He said, I had dysentery for 5 years. He said, I had a fungus that grew all over my body. And he said, they never tortured us. He said, if they wanted to punish us, they just took the mosquito netting away for a couple of days. He said, they took my mosquito netting away, and he said, in 1 square inch on my arm, I counted over 100 mosquito bites. He said, one day, they came down to where we were, and they took the other 3 prisoners up to the office of the camp. And he said, I kind of wondered why they took them and not me. He said they were up there a couple hours, and then they called me. Well, he did what you would do. He stepped into the office. There's his fellow prisoners. Hi, guys. And when he did that, the head of the prison camp said, you can't talk to them anymore. He said, what do you mean I can't talk to them anymore? We're your prisoners here. I've been living with them. What do you mean I can't talk to them anymore? They said, no. You're the prisoner. They're going home tomorrow. They signed the letter. They all signed the letter. You know who picked them up? They went home the next day. You know who picked them up? Communist Tom Hayden. For the uninformed, Tom Hayden was the husband of Hanoi Jane Fonda, the communist. And he thought, good night. I'm alone now. But by that time, they pretty much established where they were. They thought they knew where they were. And they'd made a pact that if any of them ever escape, they would have a rescue operation come in and get them out. And they said, the way you would know the rescue was going to take place, because now the war is escalating, and they had these 01 bird dogs. It was just basically a Cessna, high-wing Cessna. It's a scout plane. And he said, an 01 bird dog will fly over the camp, and it'll shut the engine down, and then start it back up, and then shut it down a second time, and then start it back up. And they said, when you hear a plane cut his engine twice, just get into the jungle. The Americans will come in and bomb the camp. A helicopter will come and get you, and out you go. He said, man, every day I'd go out. He said, here come this 01 bird dog flying high. He never cut his engine. And then another would come, never cut his engine. He said, I went out for days. I went out for weeks. He said, after months, I realized The Army never sent rescue when I was captured. They abandoned me. My country is now revolting against this war. My country has abandoned me. Now the very prisoners that were here with me, suffering with me, they have abandoned me. He said, and then I lost the will to live. But there was nobody to boost him. And he said, I had to lay in my bed, and I didn't want to eat, and I didn't want to go, and he was sick. And he said, I had to talk myself through that to just keep living. And when he had lost everything, and when absolutely everybody, think about this, this guy is half a world away from here. He is not home. He is with people that hate him, and all he wants to do is go home. And he's absolutely alone. And he said, you know what I had? He said, the only thing I had left, there was nobody on my side. The only thing I had left was my military code of conduct. Now, if there's a veteran in this room, you know what the military code of conduct is. There is a basic code of conduct, and it's the rules that a member of our U.S. military have to live by. But basically, the simplest definition of a military code of conduct isn't a bunch of words on a piece of paper. Right? I thought, wait a minute. This guy wants to go home. He's in a hostile environment. They hate him there. And nobody is on his side. And all he's got is some words on a piece of paper. And I thought, I want to go home. And I am in an environment where they hate me. And all I got are some words on a piece of paper. My military code of conduct. He said one thing that he managed to keep from his captors was they never knew that he could read and understand and speak Vietnamese. So he said, I was the good little prisoner. I'd sweep the prison office out because that way, while I was doing it, I could read all the papers on the desk. And he said, one day I was sweeping the office, I was there alone, and he said a paper caught my attention because I saw my name on it. And he said, I looked at the letterhead, and it was from North Vietnam, and they had written to the POW camp and said, send that guy north. And he knew if they send me north, I'll never go home. I'll never be seen again. I have got to escape now. While he planned his fourth escape, he woke up one morning to the sound of 500-pound bombs slamming into this camp because now the war is at its peak. It's not 1963, it's 1968. It's been 5 years, and the Americans are bombing all of these Viet Cong camps in the Mekong Delta trying to wipe them out. Now you have to understand, this guy's now 120 pounds. He's suntan wearing black pajamas. He looks just like everybody else. And he said, we had to abandon the camp and run. He said, for 3 days, the Americans tried to kill us. They didn't know who they're shooting at. They didn't know who they're bombing. And he said, we came into a field of elephant grass. Elephant grass is 8 and 9 feet tall. And he said there were 2 Huey gunships, 2 helicopter gunships, and they were just going back and forth in that field. And every time they'd see somebody, they'd just machine gun them. And he thought, I've got to get the attention of one of those Americans to rescue me, but I got to get away from this camp. Now, it was actually easier than you think. The camp is walking in line, and he's the next to the last guy. All the Viet Cong are ahead of him, except the guy that's his guard behind him. So he said, all I did, because everybody's looking at these helicopters, he said, I just started walking slower. And he said, when I walked slower, the whole camp walked away from us. He said, now it's just me and my guard, and he never noticed. But he said, a helicopter came real close, and he said when he looked up at it, while it had his attention, he said, I picked up a piece of wood, and he said, I laid him down. He never got up again. He said, then I beat down about an 8-foot square in the elephant grass, and as a Huey gunship flew over, I waved to him, and he said, I looked the pilot dead in the eyes, and I knew he saw me. And when he flew over me, I saw him do his bank. He is doing a 360-degree turn to come back and take me home. But he couldn't hear what they were saying over the radio. And when they went over top of him, the co-pilot said to the pilot, there's one, what are you going to do? And as that pilot began to bank, he said, next pass, I'm going to gun him. He wasn't coming back around to save him. He was coming back around to kill him. Rose stood there watching that helicopter thinking, this guy's coming to take me home. He's coming to kill him. And he said that pilot up in that helicopter lined up, put the crosshairs right on Roe, put his thumb on the trigger, and is about to blow him to eternity. Roe don't even know it. And from 1,000 feet up, there's another helicopter, had a lieutenant colonel. And he's kind of heading up this operation, and he heard about that, and he said, don't shoot him, capture him. I want a prisoner to interrogate. So that pilot took his thumb off the trigger, pulled collect, and as that helicopter began to descend on that little patch in that field of elephant grass, one of the door gunners said, that's an American. And he said they came down, and he said, I'll never forget, he said they kind of picked me up because he was in such bad health. And they said they put me on the floor of that helicopter, and he said that pilot poured the kerosene, those two jet engines. He said, I felt myself being lifted off the earth. I thought, yeah, isn't that what we're waiting for? I mean, really, guys, aren't we all sitting here waiting to be airlifted out? Yeah. He got airlifted out. And the pilot looked over his shoulder. He said, who are you? Identify yourself. He said, I am Lieutenant James Nicholas Rowe, United States Army Special Forces. The pilot got on and reported who they picked up, put the radio back, turned back around at him and said, no, you're not. He said, I'm Lieutenant James Nicholas Rowe, U.S. Army Special Forces. The pilot said, no, you're not. He said, I am Lieutenant James Nicholas Rowe, United States Army Special Forces. He said, no, you're not. You're Major James Nicholas Rowe, U.S. Army Special Forces. The 5 years he was in prison, he'd been promoted through captain to major and didn't even know it. He hadn't done anything to earn it. He just stayed in. Anybody getting this? He said, we landed at an American base, and he said, I get off the helicopter, and everybody's welcoming me there, but he said, I didn't fit in because he said, here I am in these black pajamas, which was the uniform of the enemy, and I'm surrounded by all these guys in OD green. And some guy said, that'll never do. And some guy ran off to the quartermaster and came back with a brand new olive drab Army uniform. He said, I took my clothes off right there in the tarmac and put it on. So there was a major in the crowd, and he took the clusters off his collar and pinned them on me right there. And I thought, yeah, if I got this right, when we get airlifted out, I'm getting new clothes. I'm getting the robes of righteousness. He said from there, they took me to the mess hall. And he gave it a whole new reason to be called mess. You see, the day he was captured, he said all I had to eat was a half a cup of uncooked rice and a half a cup of rock salt. He said everything they had, I ate twice. And I thought, yeah, if I got this straight, aren't we going to have a meal? Don't they call it the marriage supper of the Lamb? And I thought, man, this guy's going through everything I'm going to go through. And they put him in the hospital, you know, the infirmary, to kind of get his health back, get rid of this mold, get some weight back on him. And he said one day, a really sharp lieutenant colonel came in. I mean, just all the creases in the right place, had a briefcase, very business-looking guy, sat me down at the table, says, Major Rowe, we're so glad you're back. And he opened up that briefcase, and he took out a letter with U.S. Army stationery on the top of it, placed it at the bottom to sign, turned the letter around, handed it to Rowe, handed him a pen, and said, here you go, sign that, Major. And he said, Rowe said, I picked up the pen. I'm about to sign this letter. And he goes, sure, what is this? He said, that's a waiver of your civil rights for your court-martial review. He stopped. He said, what? I don't know if you people realize this, but anybody who is in the military who is captured has to go through a court-martial review to find out if at any point when they were captured, when they were a prisoner, did they violate that code of conduct. And I thought, what an amazing thing. The guy was the only guy in the camp, but if he had violated those words on that piece of paper, it had caught up with him right there. And Rowe said, I'm not signing this. He said, oh, don't worry about it, Major. Everybody's got to sign it. Everybody's got to go through this. Just sign it. You'll be okay. He said, no, you don't understand. I was a prisoner for 5 years. All I had to do was sign something that wasn't true, and I could have come home. And he said, I wouldn't sign it for them. I'm not signing it for you. He says, Major, listen, you got to do this. He said, I'm not doing it. He said, you will. Put the letter back in his briefcase, said, Major, let me know. He said, trust me, you'll be okay. Yeah, I trust you. Now, I'm going to tell you, I hate to have to do this. I have to preface my next remark, because every time I give this remark without the preface, when I tell what his what his final decision was, everybody laughs, and I've never understood why people laugh. He'd just come from 5 years in a prison camp in the Mekong Delta. And he said, if I sign this letter and they find some charge to bring against me, they're going to put me in Fort Leavenworth military prison in Leavenworth, Kansas. And he said this. His conclusion was, if they put me in Fort Leavenworth, I'll have 3 square meals a day and an indoor toilet. That's pretty good living. He said, come on, Lieutenant Colonel. Lieutenant Colonel put that paper over there, and he signed James Nicholas Rowe, Major James Nicholas Rowe. And they stood him up before a board of superior officers from the United States Army. And when he was done testifying about the last 5 years of his life, they all got together, and they talked it over, and they got up and said, no charges. And I thought, yeah, I think we call that the judgment seat of Christ. And if I got this right, it says, for we must all, nobody here is exempt, for we must all stand before the judgment seat of Christ to receive the things done in the body, whether it be good or bad. You know what he was doing when I read his book? He was lieutenant colonel. He died in 1987. He was in the Philippines, taught the Philippine army how to defeat the communists. And they assassinated him when he was driving downtown Manila. But at the time he wrote this book, he had developed a new program with our military that they'd never had before until he escaped. And that program is called SERE, S-E-R-E, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. I thought, yeah, he's ruling over his own part of the military. Isn't that one of our options? If we can just stick with this code of conduct. Let me tell you what James Nicholas Rowe said. He said, the world doesn't care about the storms you've been through, but did you bring in the ship? That captain was 400 yards from port, but he did not bring his ship in without damage. And Rowe says, doesn't matter what you go through, guys. Those 3 guys that signed the paper, they never brought in the ship. I don't care what you've been through. When I say that, I don't mean that coldly. I mean that I do have compassion. I am sorry. I am sorry for your grief. I am sorry for your pain. I am sorry for what you are facing today. But this cruise is not over. And you know what the ultimate end of your life is? Did you bring in the ship? I'd like you to stand with your heads bowed. You know what Paul said to Timothy over and over again? Tim, endure hardness as a good soldier. Endure persecution. Endure sound doctrine. Endure afflictions. Tim, endure all things. Because if you don't endure, you might look good for a while, but you'll never bring in the ship. Father, I am facing a room full of humans. And I know that the Bible says none of us are good, but I'll bet you, Father, in this area, this is some of the best. Coming to church on a Tuesday night. And I know there's people in here that their desire is to serve you till they draw their last breath. I have no idea what they're facing. I have no idea how many people in this room think they couldn't finish out the week for you. I have no idea who here is angry with you. And I'm not scolding when I say it, Father. The trials of life, the afflictions, the persecution, the orders that you gave them that didn't have their best interest in mind, the doctrine. Whatever it is, God, they just feel like they can't go another step. I pray for these people tonight that they can follow the simple one-word instruction that Paul told Timothy. Endure, 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 endure. God, we don't want to wreck this ship 400 yards from port. We want to make it all the way to the end. We want to enjoy the new clothes. We want to enjoy the marriage supper. We want to skate through the judgment seat of Christ. We want to rule over something to your glory. I pray for these people, God. I do. I ask you, help them to endure. In Jesus' name. With your heads bowed and your eyes closed, as the piano plays, maybe somebody needs to come down here tonight and say, God, will you help me endure? I don't think this, guys. I don't think that Sam Gipp is the only guy in this room who has ever said, I don't think I can take anymore. I don't think I can take any more of this. We've all said that. So what's the answer, preacher? Endure. There's no other way to say it. Rose said it this way. The world doesn't care about the storms you've been through, but did you bring in the ship? That's how Lieutenant Colonel James Nicholas Rose said it. Let me tell you how the Apostle Paul said it. For I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Endured. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give to me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all them also that love is appearing. Endure. Folks have come. If you need to come, there's still time.